Just 2 minutes ago, Chris Coons hit Cash Patel with a question so direct, so loaded, that the FBI director's own lawyers actually leaned forward in their chairs, like they were about to tackle him before he could answer. Director Patel, Coons said, his voice calm but sharp enough to cut. Did you shut down FBI investigations to shield Donald Trump from prosecution? 9 words. No warm-up, no dancing around. Just the question that's been hanging over this whole investigation since Patel took the job. Patel sat there frozen for 43 seconds. Not a single word. You could watch the story play out on his face. Shock, then calculation, then fear, and finally that look people get when they realize there's no way out. Because Coons didn't ask hoping for an answer. He asked because he already had the evidence, and Patel knew it. Let's rewind. February 11th, 2026. Senate Judiciary Committee. The clock reads 4:12 p.m. They've been at it almost 5 hours. 5 hours of grilling Patel on Epstein files, vanished testimonies, stacks of classified documents. Somehow Patel kept dodging. He hid behind protocol, cited national security, gave nothing away. And then there's Chris Coons, the Delaware senator, former corporate lawyer, Yale law grad, the guy who doesn't rush. He builds his case piece by piece until there's nowhere to run. He doesn't go first or second. He watches, takes notes, studies the witness, waits for the right moment. At 4:12 p.m., that moment arrived. Director Patel, Coons said, his Delaware accent coming through slightly, almost polite but with an edge underneath. I want to ask you about something very specific, not about classifications or redactions, about the investigations themselves. He grabbed a navy blue folder thick with paper. According to FBI case records I subpoenaed, there were 14 active investigations shut down in your first 90 days as director. He paused. Not closed for lack of evidence. Not wrapped up with prosecutions. Just terminated. Shut down by direct order. Patel shifted in his seat. You could see his confidence going stiff. Senator, case management decisions are made by career prosecutors based on evidence and resources. Coons barely reacted. That's the standard answer, Director. But I have the termination orders right here. He held up the stack. And everyone has something in common. He started reading. Investigation 2024 CF 8847. Subject: financial transactions between Trump Organization subsidiaries and foreign entities. Status: active with grand jury impaneled. Terminated November 18, 2025. Reason: insufficient prosecutorial merit. Ordered by Director's Office. Coons glanced up. Insufficient prosecutorial merit for a case with a grand jury already seated. That's unusual, Director. Another paper. Investigation 2024 CF 9012. Subject: undisclosed foreign contacts by Trump transition team members. Status: active with multiple cooperating witnesses. Terminated November 22, 2025. Reason: resource reallocation. Director's Office. And another. Investigation 2024 CF 9134. Subject: potential obstruction regarding classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. Status: active with pending indictments. Terminated November 29, 2025. Reason: prosecutorial discretion. Director's Office. Coons set the papers down firmly on the desk. 14 investigations, Director. Every single one tied directly to Donald Trump, his family, his business or his closest allies. Every one built on real evidence. Bank records, witness testimony, cooperating sources, months or years of work by career FBI agents, and every single one killed during your first 90 days. All by orders from your office. He leaned in. That's not case management, Director. That's a pattern. And that pattern has a very specific legal name. It's called obstruction of justice. Patel looked pale, knuckles white on the table. Senator, the investigations you're referencing were reviewed by career prosecutors who determined continued resource allocation wasn't justified given competing. Coons cut him off. Let me read you something, Director. He pulled out another document. This is an internal FBI memo from Deputy Director Sarah Chen, dated November 15, 2025. 3 days before you terminated the first investigation. He read from the document. Quote, Director Patel has instructed senior staff that all investigations with potential connections to the president or his associates are to be flagged for immediate review. No investigative steps are to be taken without director-level approval. This represents an unprecedented departure from FBI protocols. I am formally documenting my concerns about potential political interference in law enforcement matters. End quote. Coons looked up from the paper and stared directly at Patel. Your own deputy director saw exactly what you were doing, Director. She was so concerned about it that she put her objections in writing, in an official FBI memorandum. 3 days before you started systematically shutting down Trump-related investigations, the entire chamber had gone completely still. So let me ask you something, Director. Coons' voice was quiet, but it carried perfectly in the silence. Where is Deputy Director Sarah Chen now? Patel hesitated for just a fraction of a second. She resigned from the FBI in December. Coons nodded slowly. She resigned. After 22 years of service at the Federal Bureau of Investigation, spotless record, commendations from 3 different presidents across 2 different political parties, and she just walked away less than 2 months after you became director. He pulled out yet another document. I have her resignation letter right here, Director. Would you like me to read it to the committee? Patel didn't say anything. Coons read it anyway. Quote, I can no longer serve in an FBI where political considerations are allowed to override basic evidentiary standards and investigative protocols. I have personally witnessed the systematic dismantling of legitimate criminal investigations that posed potential threats to powerful political figures. I have been directly ordered to participate in what I can only characterize as obstruction of justice at the highest levels of federal law enforcement. My conscience will not permit me to continue in this role. End quote. He set the resignation letter down carefully. Your own deputy director, the number 2 person in the entire FBI. She called what you were doing obstruction of justice, Director. She quit her job rather than be part of it. And you're sitting here trying to tell this committee that these terminations were just routine case management decisions. If you've been following this story and you want to understand how real accountability works when someone comes fully prepared with evidence, please like this video and subscribe to this channel right now. Hit the bell so you don't miss any updates as this develops. Drop a comment and tell me what you think Patel should have said. This is the moment that could change everything about how we understand what happened at the FBI. Patel's voice sounded strained when he finally responded. Deputy Director Chen and I had fundamental disagreements about investigative priorities and resource allocation. Her characterization of my decisions reflects her personal interpretation and opinion, rather than the factual basis for Coons cut him off again. Let's talk about facts then, Director. Let's look very specifically at Investigation 2024 CF 8847, the Trump Organization financial transactions case. He lifted up a thick folder that had been sitting on his desk. That investigation ran for 18 full months before you arrived at the FBI. FBI financial crimes agents tracked $47 million in highly suspicious transfers between Trump Organization subsidiaries and multiple shell companies with documented ties to foreign governments. Russia, Saudi Arabia, the UAE. They had bank records showing every transfer. They had wire transfer receipts with dates and amounts. They had witness testimony from people inside the organization. And they had a cooperating witness ready to testify before a grand jury about exactly how the money moved and why. Coons held up the termination order next to the investigation file. And you shut it down. Called it insufficient prosecutorial merit. Killed an 18-month investigation that had already convinced a grand jury to hear evidence. He paused. Why, Director? What was insufficient about $47 million in suspicious foreign payments? Patel reached for his water glass. His hand was visibly shaking slightly. Senator, financial investigations of that nature require enormous allocation of investigative resources and the evidentiary threshold for successful criminal prosecution in complex financial peasant. Did you personally review the evidence? Coons broke in. His voice was sharper now. Did you look at the bank records yourself? Did you read the wire transfer documentation? Did you review the witness statements? Did you interview the cooperating witness? Did you examine any of the actual evidence that 18 months of FBI work had generated? Silence. 3 seconds of it. Then 5. Then 7. No, Patel finally said. His voice was quiet. I relied on summary materials that were prepared for me by senior staff members who had reviewed. Coons leaned all the way back in his chair. So let me make sure I understand this correctly, Director. You personally terminated an 18-month FBI investigation into $47 million in trace suspicious financial transactions, an investigation that had bank records, wire transfers, witness testimony, and a cooperating witness ready to testify. And you made that decision without ever once looking at the actual evidence yourself. You just shut it down based on someone else's summary. He leaned forward again. On whose recommendation did you make that decision, Director? Patel's face lost what little color it still had left. The decision was made after extensive consultations with Department of Justice leadership and reflected a comprehensive assessment of which DOJ leadership. Coons pressed. Give me a name, Director. Who told you to shut down that investigation? Patel hesitated. The pause was absolutely brutal to watch. Those consultations involved several different officials at various levels, and I am not at liberty to disclose the specific details of internal deliberative communications without. Coons gave him a smile that had no warmth in it whatsoever. Let me help you out here, Director. He pulled out another document. This is a White House visitor log from November 16, 2025. That's 2 days before you terminated the very first investigation on my list. According to this official log, you had a private meeting with President Donald Trump in the Oval Office. Duration of the meeting 47 minutes. No White House staff present. No FBI staff present. No official agenda listed. Just you and the President. Alone. For 47 minutes. He held up the termination order right next to the visitor log. 2 days after that 47-minute private meeting, you shut down the investigation into Trump's company's finances. You shut down the investigation into his transition team's foreign contacts. You shut down the investigation into his handling of classified documents. Coons' voice got noticeably sharper. Director Patel, did President Trump order you to terminate these investigations? Did he tell you to shut them down during that 47-minute meeting? The question hung in the air between them. Heavy, unavoidable, deadly. Patel opened his mouth, closed it again. His own attorney sitting behind him looked frozen, unable to help. The chamber was absolutely dead quiet. 43 seconds. That is how long Cash Patel sat at that witness table, unable to say a word, unable to answer the question, unable to deny what had happened. While millions of Americans watching at home saw exactly what his silence meant. Finally he spoke. His voice was barely above a whisper. Senator, communications between the President and the FBI Director are subject to executive privilege protections, and I am not at liberty to characterize or discuss the content of those privileged communications without executive privilege, Coons repeated. He said it slow and flat. So you are invoking executive privilege to avoid answering the question of whether the President of the United States ordered you to shut down criminal investigations into himself and his associates. He shook his head slowly. Director Patel, executive privilege does not cover criminal conspiracy. It does not shield obstruction of justice. And it absolutely does not protect a president who orders his FBI director to kill active criminal investigations into his own conduct. Coons gathered all his papers together. Here is what the actual facts tell us, Director. In your first 3 months as FBI Director, you personally terminated 14 separate Trump-related criminal investigations. Your own Deputy Director was so alarmed by what you were doing that she documented her concerns in writing and then quit rather than participate. You didn't even bother to review the evidence in these cases before you shut them down. And 2 days before you started terminating all these investigations, you spent 47 minutes alone in the Oval Office with the man at the center of every single one of them. Coons locked eyes with Patel across the witness table. That is not case management, Director. That is not exercising good prosecutorial judgment. That is not even about conserving investigative resources. Let's call this exactly what it is. It's a cover-up. A systematic cover-up of criminal conduct. And you are the person who carried it out. He stood up. Mr. Chairman, I am formally requesting that this committee immediately subpoena every single communication between Director Patel and the White House regarding these case terminations. And I am requesting that Director Patel be referred to the Department of Justice Inspector General for a full investigation into obstruction of justice. One last look at Patel. You asked where Deputy Director Chen went. Here's the real answer to that question, Director. She walked away because she was not willing to help you protect the President who appointed you. She chose her oath to the Constitution over her career. She chose justice over politics. He pointed directly at Patel. You made the opposite choice. And those 43 seconds where you sat there in complete silence just told every person watching this hearing exactly where you stand and who you actually work for. The hearing room exploded into chaos. Shouting. Procedural motions being called out. Cameras flashing from every direction. But the damage was already done. And everyone in that chamber knew it. 2 minutes. That is all it took. One direct question. 14 dead investigations. A secret 47-minute meeting in the Oval Office. And 43 seconds of silence that spoke louder than any answer possibly could have. Did you shut down FBI investigations to protect Donald Trump from prosecution? Cash Patel had no answer. And honestly, that silence was all the answer anyone needed. 2 minutes. 9 words in one question. 14 investigations buried before they could reach indictment. Chris Coons asked the question directly. And Cash Patel's 43 seconds of frozen silence told the entire country the truth about what the FBI director did for the man who gave him the job. Now the whole world knows.